I've made a few videos about the worst tanks in War Thunder, both premium and overall, but I haven't talked about the absolute best tank in game. Underrated vehicles, sure, but not the cream of the crop. I won't be talking about premium vehicles, since I want to explore vehicles that are quote-unquote free, so that includes squadron vehicles, event vehicles, and tech tree vehicles. At some point in the future, I'll make a video talking about just premiums. Now, it's important to clarify what I mean by best tank. I don't mean the absolute strongest tank in the game, because then it would just be a top tier MBT. I mean what tank performs best relative to its BR. Obviously it'd be a bit difficult to parse all the tiers, but I had a pretty straightforward solution. I've played pretty much every tank in the game at this point, so for the most part, I looked at my stats to see what vehicles perform the best. As it turns out, the vehicles with the best stats were universally event vehicles. It's not exactly surprising, since selling powerful vehicles is a very easy way to make money, even if you can't technically earn them for free. I figured the Kachi would be a good starting point, since it was the only vehicle I hadn't played before. You wouldn't think much of it just by looking at it. It's massive, unwieldy, and not very impressive. It does have a lot going for it though. It's pretty well armored for a 1.7 tank. The pontoons essentially act as spaced armor, making heat or HE rounds ineffective, unless they shoot the turret of course, which many people don't know to do. It has a massive crew of 7, which given the guns you fight against, means it could take a lot of damage. Ammo and fuel tanks are low in the hull, further increasing survivability. The side armor is very thin, but this can actually work in your favor. It's so thin in fact, that some APHE rounds won't fuse at all. Finally, the gun is really good. The Japanese 47 is effective at 2.3, let alone 1.7. It has a lot of penetration, has decent damage, reloads quickly, and gets shoulder stabilization. Not really sure why, but it reminded me of the Mouse. I guess they're both pretty slow and durable. Obviously the Kachi is pretty great, possibly even overpowered, but I don't think it's the best low tier tank. At that BR range, autocannons are the meta, and of course it can face the 105 Sherman. That's not really a competition. The Kachi is pretty far up there though. In fact, it was a pretty close call between all of these vehicles. Moving on, I tried Object 279 next. When it was first added to the game, it was arguably one of the most broken vehicles ever added. It does practically everything well. It's got a powerful gun that's stabilized, one-shots, and has a decently fast reload. Turret traverse is a bit slow, but it's not that much of a hindrance. The armor's pretty good all around. It can even stop some heat and APFSDS rounds. Mobility is fairly solid as well. Even though it only has roughly 16 horsepower per ton, it doesn't feel slow at all. And finally, it's got a rangefinder, which obviously makes long-range shots easier. While it is one of my favorite tanks to play, it can be very situational. At that same BR, a lot of tanks have thermals and laser rangefinders, which are arguably much more useful than armor. The gun is great for one-shotting vehicles, but it struggles to penetrate in up tiers. It easily would have won if it was still 8.3, but those days are long gone, thankfully. Next, the T-18E2 Boarhound. The Boarhound is one of my favorites, and for many reasons. The gun is the greatest out of all of them. The 57 has a lot of penetration, fires quickly, and does a decent amount of damage. It also has a vertical stabilizer to boot. The Boarhound is slow for a wheeled vehicle, but it makes up for it with armor. You won't be stopping many actual tank rounds, but it can stop HMGs and autocannons. Compared to a lot of tanks in that range, it is still decently fast, but it really struggles in snow or mud. The Boarhound is so good in fact, I would bring it to fight Tigers and Panthers, and I often did better with it than actual 5.0 tanks. If it weren't for the M4A1 being 3.3, I would say the Boarhound is the winner. But for as much as I like it, it's simply far too unwieldy. And finally, what I think is the best tank in War Thunder, the KV-220. This might seem like an odd choice, but let me explain. In my eyes, it has the perfect blend of mobility, armor, survivability, and firepower. Much like the 279, its power to weight ratio isn't great, but you can't really tell when driving it. It accelerates pretty quickly, and turns surprisingly well, despite not having neutral steering. The 85 appears to be pretty weak, but its angled penetration is kinda insane. Not only can you upper front plate jumbos on level ground, but you can even pen the sides of angled Panthers. The round has a ton of HE filler, enough to cause overpressure. The best part is the armor though. The sides in the front are the same thickness, 100mm. If you can get the angling right, the 220 is practically untouchable. The supplies to the turret as well. The weakest part of the turret is the mantlet, which is 90mm. Even if someone knows to shoot there, the breach will usually absorb all damage. And speaking of survivability, the 220 is pretty great there too. Even when taking as many as 30 rounds, all of the ammo is on the whole floor, making it difficult to ammo rack. With 6 crew members, the 220 is very durable. It is an amazing tank, so much so, I think it's the best tank in the game. I'm sure some of you will disagree, so let me know what tank you think is best. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.